John sat on the edge of the ship, looking out at the strange world below. It was a planet he had never seen before, with purple skies and red mountains that seemed to glow in the dark. The humans had been at war with the alien species here for many years. They were known as the Xerians, a powerful and feared race. Their empire had crushed many other worlds, and they ruled with an iron fist. John was not a soldier by choice. He had joined the military because he wanted to protect Earth, his home. He never thought much about the alien world he would be sent to, never imagined that it would be so different from what he had seen before. But there was something about the Xerians that stood out from all the other alien races. They were not just fierce warriors. They had a presence, quiet strength that made everyone fear them. And at the center of it all was Xera. Xera, the princess of the Xerians, was the one everyone talked about. Her beauty and power were legendary, and so was her cruelty. She had led her people in battles that had wiped out entire fleets of enemies. They said her gaze alone could bring terror to any soldier. But John did not fear her, not like the others. He first saw Xera when the humans were invited to negotiate a ceasefire. The moment she walked into the room, everyone went quiet. She was tall and graceful, with sharp features that could strike fear into anyone's heart. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes, dark and cold, seemed to see right through him. Her presence was overwhelming, yet John couldn't stop looking at her. There was something else in her eyes, something he couldn't explain. It wasn't fear, it was something else. John tried to push the thought away. He was just a soldier. She was a powerful alien princess, and they were on opposite sides of a war. But the longer he thought about her, the more confused he became. Why did he feel drawn to her? Why did he want to know her, to understand what lay behind that cold, impassive face? That night, after the meeting, he found himself wandering the halls of the alien ship. It was strange how empty the place felt. He had been told the Xerians were ruthless, but there was an odd silence in the air. He turned a corner and almost bumped into her. Xera stood there, her back to him, staring out into the distant stars. Through a large window, she didn't hear him approach. The way she stood there, so still, so calm, it felt as if she was not just watching the stars. She was lost in thought, in a world of her own. John hesitated. He should turn around and leave. But he didn't. Something inside him pushed him forward. "Princess Xera?" he asked, his voice low, unsure if she even heard him. Xera turned slowly, her dark eyes meeting his. For a moment John thought she would strike him down, but instead she just stared at him, as if studying him. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice soft but sharp, like a blade hidden in velvet. "This is not a place for humans." John didn't back away. "I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted to see the stars." Xera seemed to consider him for a moment before walking over to the window. "The stars have nothing to do with us," she said, her tone distant, almost melancholic. "We don't look at them the same way you do." John stepped closer, trying to understand. "Then what do you see?" She looked at him again, her gaze piercing, as if weighing whether or not she should reveal anything. "I see a future where my people rule everything, where we are untouchable. And I see a man who is foolish enough to think we are the same." John's heart skipped a beat. There it was, the fearlessness in her words. The confidence that he had always heard about but never truly understood. But John wasn't like the others. He wasn't afraid of her. "I'm not afraid of you, Xera," he said quietly. Xera laughed, a soft, almost sad laugh. "You should be." John took a deep breath, stepping even closer. His heart raced, but he didn't let it show. He wasn't sure why, but he felt as if he had to speak his mind now, before it was too late. "You're not just a weapon, Xera," he said, his voice steady. "I see something else in you, something ... human." Xera's expression changed. For the briefest moment, she seemed taken aback. She blinked, then quickly looked away, as if ashamed of the thought. "You know nothing about me," she said, her tone now sharp. "You cannot understand me." John stood his ground. "Maybe I can, if you let me." Xera's eyes flashed with anger. But John could see something else in them, something deeper, something softer. She quickly turned her back to him, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You don't belong here, human," she said coldly. "And neither do I. I'm not your kind. I'm not the kind of woman you dream about." John's heart raced as the words hit him. Couldn't explain it, but he wanted to try. Didn't know why, but he needed to know her better. He didn't want to be like everyone else, afraid of her, judging her. "I don't dream about you, Zira," he said, his voice soft. "I want to be with you, not as a soldier, not as an enemy, just as a man who sees you for who you really are." Zira's hands trembled, but she didn't turn to face him. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. For a moment, John thought she might say something. But then she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "You are foolish," she said, "and you do not understand what you're asking." But John didn't move. He remained standing there, hoping for something, anything to change. He knew that she was struggling, that there was something inside her that longed for something more. He took a deep breath and said what he had been thinking since the moment he met her. "I want you to be my wife, Zira." There was a long pause. Zira's body stiffened, and she let out a sharp breath, almost as if the very air around her had been sucked out. I cannot," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She turned her back on him, and John's heart sank. What had he done? He stood there staring at the princess, who had brought fear to so many, now broken in front of him. Zira had cried, not because of the war, but because of the pain of living. In a world where love seemed impossible, John had only asked a simple question, but in that moment he realized just how much fear, pain, and loneliness had lived inside her all along. The silence between John and Zira hung thick in the air like a heavy mist. John stood there, his heart pounding in his chest, watching Zira's back as she stared out of the large window. Her silver hair shining in the dim light of the alien ship. She was as distant as ever, but now there was something in hers, something raw and unspoken, that made him want to step closer, to comfort her, to understand her pain. But Zira wasn't someone who let people get close. She never had. Her life had been one of power and control, of being the princess of a brutal empire that demanded respect, fear, and loyalty. She was not a woman who would let herself be vulnerable. And John knew this, but it didn't stop him from wanting. To try, he wasn't a fool. He knew what he was asking was difficult. Marriage to Azirians was not only an alliance, it was a symbol of deep commitment, a bond that went beyond love or feelings. It meant joining their world, their people, their history. And for Zira, that meant breaking away from everything she had ever known. But John didn't care about the war, the politics, or the status of their two species. He cared about Zira. He cared about the woman who had shown him, even in small moments, that there was more to her than the fearsome warrior everyone saw. She was strong, but she was also lost. He couldn't help but feel like he was the one who could find her, if she would just let him. The next day, John couldn't get the moment out of his mind. He tried to focus on his duties, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Zira's face, her cold, unreadable expression. The way her shoulders had stiffened when he asked her to be his wife, and the tears that had quickly been wiped away. Don't. Shh. He hadn't expected that, and yet here he was again, standing in front of her door, unsure if she would even let him in. After a moment of hesitation, he pressed the door panel, and it slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was dimly lit, filled with the smell of alien flowers that seemed to relax the atmosphere. Zira stood by the window again, her back to him. "Zira," John called softly. Zira turned slowly, her eyes locking with his. She didn't say anything at first, and John could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on him. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. Had to do this, had to say it again. He couldn't let the chance slip away. "I know you didn't want to hear it before," John began, his voice steady but gentle. "But I need you to understand, I wasn't trying to push you, not asking for a quick answer. He paused, looking for the right words. "I just want you to know that I care about you, more than anything." Zira's eyes narrowed slightly, her jaw tightening. She was still holding herself at a distance, as if afraid to let anyone in. "You don't know me, human," she replied, her voice cool. "You don't know what you're asking. You don't know what it means to be a part of my world." "I know it's not easy," John said, stepping closer, though not enough to invade her space. "But what if? What if we could build something different? Something that doesn't have to be about our people or their wars. Just us. I don't know what the future holds, Zero, but I want to try, and I want you to try with me." Zero looked at him for a long time, as if she was considering his words carefully. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. John could see the conflict in her eyes, the same conflict he had seen when she had first rejected him. "I can't," Zero whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't just let go of everything I've ever known. I can't leave behind my people, my duties, my entire existence." Her eyes shone with a mixture of pain and fear. "I am not like you. I was born to rule, to lead, to conquer. I cannot be what you want me to be." John's heart ached at her words, but he wasn't ready to give up. He wasn't going to walk away. "This time, maybe you don't have to be what they want you to be," John said quietly. "Maybe you can be who you want to be. Maybe you can be Zero, the woman who chooses her own future, her own happiness, for once." Zero stepped back, shaking her head. "You don't understand," she said bitterly. "I was raised to be cold, to be unfeeling, to be perfect. I was trained to lead, to never show weakness. If I show weakness, I'll lose everything. My people will destroy me. It will destroy anyone who dares to love me." John's gaze softened. As he stepped closer, his voice low but firm, "But you're not weak. You're the strongest person I know. And I don't want to be just a soldier to you, Zira. I don't want to be just a conquest. I want to be the one who stands by your side. I want to be the one who supports you, who loves you, and who will never give up on you." Zira's expression faltered, the walls she had built around herself showing cracks for the first time. Eyes glistened, but she quickly turned away, trying to hide the tears that threatened to fall. "I don't know how to love, John," she said quietly. "I don't know how to let someone in. I don't know what it would mean to trust someone." With my heart, John's heart clenched. He stepped forward, reaching out gently, but hesitated before touching her. "You don't have to know everything right now," he said softly. "All you have to know is that I'll be here, no matter what. I won't leave, and I'll never make you feel weak for feeling something. Not ever." Zira stood still, her body trembling ever so slightly. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, as if trying to calm herself. After a long silence, she turned to face him again, her voice a whisper. "I can't promise you anything, John, but maybe we can try." The moment felt like a fragile thread connecting them, one that might snap or one that might pull them closer. But in that moment, John didn't care. He wasn't asking for perfection. He was asking for a chance. And for the first time, it seemed like Zira might be willing to give it to him. John couldn't stop thinking about what Zira had said. She had agreed to try, but something in her eyes told him that she was still unsure. She was afraid of the past, afraid of the future, and most of all, afraid of herself. The walls around her were thick and strong. It would take more than words to break them down. He had always known that the Zirians were different. Their empire had been built on fear and power, with no room for weakness. They had conquered planets, destroyed enemies, and ruled with absolute authority. Zira, as their princess, was the embodiment of everything her people stood for: strength, control, and invincibility. But John had seen something else in her, the fragility hidden behind her cold exterior. As the days passed, John found himself spending more time with Zira. At first, their conversations were short and guarded. Zira would talk about her people, her role in their empire, and the strict rules that had governed her life since she was a child. But there were moments, brief ones, when she would let her guard down, even if just for a second. During these moments, John could see the person she really was, the person she had hidden from the world for so long. One evening, after a long day of negotiations with other alien leaders, John found himself walking through the corridors of the ship once again. He didn't expect to find Zira here, but when he turned a corner, there she was, standing by a window, looking out at the stars. This time, she didn't seem as distant. Her shoulders weren't stiff, and her posture wasn't as commanding. Seemed tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of holding it all together. John hesitated for a moment before approaching her. "Zira," he called softly. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes. Something that made John feel as though she was about to reveal something important. "I know you've been carrying a lot," John said gently. "And I know you've lived a life that none of us can truly understand. But I want to. I want to understand you, Zira. I want to know who you are, not just the princess, not just the warrior." Zira's gaze softened for a moment, but then she looked away. "You think you can understand me, human?" she asked, her voice tinged with sadness. "You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what it's like to be born into a world where weakness is a crime. To grow up knowing that every decision you make could lead to someone's death." John took a step closer. "I don't know what it's like to live your life, Zira, but I do know that you're not just a warrior. You're not just a princess. You're a person just like me." Zira sighed, her eyes distant. "I wasn't always like this," she said quietly, almost to herself. "When I was a child, I was different. I was soft, gentle. My father, the king, didn't like that. He saw it as a weakness. He made sure I learned how to fight, how to lead, how to rule. He taught me that emotions were for the weak, that power was the only thing that mattered." John listened intently, trying to understand the weight of her words. He had known that Zira was strong, but he never realized how much of her strength had been forced upon her. "My mother was different," Zira continued, her voice growing softer. "She was kind, loving, but she died when I was young, remember? Watching my father grieve, but he never showed it, never cried. He taught me that crying was a sign of weakness. That's how I grew up, learning to hide my emotions, to show no fear, to be perfect." John could see the pain in her eyes as she spoke, the sadness that she had carried with her for so long. It was as though the walls she had built around herself were beginning to crack, and he could finally see the person beneath. "I hated it," Zira said, her voice trembling slightly. "I hated being trained to be a weapon. I hated that I was never allowed to be a child, but I didn't have a choice. I had to do what my father expected. I had to be the perfect princess, the perfect leader. And when my time came to rule, I did it without hesitation. I destroyed anyone who threatened my empire. I was ruthless because I thought that's what I had to be." John's heart ached for her. "You don't have to be that person anymore. Zira," he said softly, "you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to destroy anyone to prove your worth." Zira shook her head, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I've built my whole life on power and fear. If I let go of that, if I show any weakness, everything I've worked for will fall apart. My people will turn on me. My family will abandon me." John moved closer, standing beside her. He didn't know what else to say, but he wanted her to know that she wasn't alone. "You don't have to face this alone, Zira," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I'm here. I'll be here no matter what." Zira looked at him then, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. "But what if you can't love me? What if you can't accept the person I am?" John placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. "I don't care about your past, Zira. I care about who you are now. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be anything other than yourself. And I'll love you for that." Zira's breath caught in her throat. She didn't say anything for a long time, and John thought for a moment that maybe she wouldn't respond. But then, just as he was about to step away, she spoke again. "Maybe. Maybe there's more to me than I've allowed myself to see," she whispered. "Maybe there's something in me that I've buried too deep to feel."
Oh.
Smiled softly, his heart lifting. "You don't have to hide anymore, Zira. You're free to be whoever you want to be." For the first time, Zira looked at him without the cold mask she had always worn. She didn't smile, but there was something different in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, a spark of something new. She wasn't the same person she had been when they first met, and John knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but there was a noticeable shift in the air between John and Zira. It wasn't dramatic at first. It's just small moments where their paths seemed to cross more often than before. She would glance at him with an almost unreadable expression, and he would try to catch her eyes, hoping to understand what was going on in her mind. John knew that Zira was still holding back. She had agreed to try, but every step forward seemed to be followed by 2 steps back. Gosh. It was as though she was testing him, pushing him away, only to let him back in for a fleeting moment before closing herself off again. But John wasn't giving up. Not yet. And not after seeing the way she had opened up to him for the first time. No matter how small the moment was. He had seen the cracks in her armor, and he wasn't going to walk away. Not now. Not when she was beginning to trust him, even if she didn't fully realize it yet. One evening, after another long day of political talks and endless meetings, John found himself standing outside Zira's quarters once again. The corridor was quiet, with only the soft hum of the ships. Engines in the background. He had been thinking about her all day, wondering if this time would be any different. As he stood there, about to press the door panel, he heard a soft sound from within, a faint cry. His heart skipped a beat, and without thinking, he pressed. The door opened. Inside, Zira was standing by the window, her back to him, her shoulders shaking slightly. It was clear that she was trying to hide her tears, but it was no use. John could see the way her body trembled, the way her breath hitched as she fought to keep control. For the first time, Zira wasn't the strong, untouchable warrior. She wasn't. The cold, calculating princess. She was just a woman struggling with her emotions, fighting a battle she didn't want to face. John stepped forward quietly, unsure if he should say anything at all. He didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't leave her like this. Zira said softly, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. She stiffened, her shoulders tensing as if she hadn't heard him. But when she turned, he saw the rawness. In her eyes, the tears were still there, and for once, she didn't try to hide them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, wiping her eyes quickly. "I didn't mean for you to see this." John shook his head, his voice gentle. "It's okay. Don't have to hide from me." Zira took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said, her voice shaky. "I've always been strong. I've always been the one who holds everything together. And now," she looked away as if she couldn't finish the thought. John took another step forward, now standing beside her. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Zira. It's okay to feel. It's okay to let go." Zira turned to face him then, her eyes searching his face as though she was trying to figure out if he was serious. She had always believed that strength came from control, from holding her emotions in check. But now, standing here with him, she felt something different, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. "I don't know how to let go," she admitted quietly. "I've spent my whole life being the perfect ruler, the perfect warrior. I've buried everything deep inside me so no one would see. And now," she trailed off, her voice trembling. "Now I don't know how to be anything else." John looked at her with empathy, his heart aching for her. "You don't have to be perfect, Zira. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. I'm here, no matter what you feel, and I won't judge you." Zira swallowed hard, her chest tightening. With emotion, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But her fear held her back. Fear of losing control, fear of being vulnerable, fear of loving someone and losing everything. "I'm afraid," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm afraid of what happens if I let myself care. Let myself love someone. It's not just about me. It's about my people, my family, my empire. If I show any weakness, if I show them that I care, they will use it against me. They will tear everything down." John reached out then, placing a hand on her arm gently, offering her the comfort she had never allowed herself to accept. "Not weak, Zira," he said firmly. "You're strong. Stronger than anyone I've ever known. Letting someone in doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Zira's eyes searched his face, looking for any sign that he was lying, that he was just saying what she needed to hear. But she didn't find that. Instead, she found only honesty, only the quiet strength in his gaze. "I've spent my whole life being afraid of who I am," Zira said, her voice breaking. "Now I thought if I showed love or care, I would be seen as weak and everything I worked for would crumble. I've hurt people, John. I've done things I'm not proud of, and I don't know if I can ever undo them." John gave her a soft, reassuring smile. "Can't undo the past, Zira, but you can change the future. I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." For a long moment, Zira didn't say anything. She just stood there, staring at him, as if she was finally letting herself believe that he meant it. That he wasn't just saying words to comfort her, but that he was truly here to stay, to help her. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out and placed her hand over his. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. It meant she was letting him. And it meant she was beginning to trust him, to believe that she didn't have to carry everything on her own. "I don't know what the future holds," Zira said quietly. "But maybe, for the first time, I'm willing to try." John smiled at her, his heart lifting with hope. "We'll figure it out together." And for the first time, Zira allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't the weakness she had always feared it would be. Maybe, in the end, it was the only thing that could save her. The tension between John and Zira grew stronger as the days passed. They had come a long way from their first meeting, but the journey ahead was far from simple. Zira's fears still lingered, and although she had allowed herself to trust him, there was always the nagging feeling that everything could fall apart at any moment. John didn't mind. He knew that this would take time. He understood the weight of the past Zira carried, the expectations placed upon her, and the burden of leadership she had never been allowed to escape. But he also saw the woman beneath the powerful exterior, the woman who could still smile, still care, and still feel, despite everything she had been taught to suppress. The war had dragged on longer than anyone had expected, and the humans were growing desperate. They had fought against the Zirians for years, and though the battles were hard, they had managed to push back in ways the Zirians hadn't expected. But the peace talks had failed, and now both sides were preparing for what could be the final battle. Zira was caught in the middle of it all. She couldn't be the princess the Empire wanted her to be, and the woman she was learning to be with John. Her people expected her to lead them to victory, to crush the humans once and for all, to show no weakness. But Zira had seen something in John, something she hadn't known existed in herself. She had seen kindness. She had seen hope. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if there was more to life than power and war. But the pressures of her position were growing. Her father, the king, had made it clear that he would never allow her to marry a human, especially not one who was a soldier. He had warned her that if she chose John, she would lose everything. Her position, her family, her future all would be forfeited. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting with her father, Zira found herself alone in the corridor, walking in a daze. The weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her, and she didn't know where to turn. She needed to speak with John, needed to hear his voice, but she wasn't sure if she could face him with the weight of her decision. As she walked past a darkened hallway, she heard footsteps approaching. She froze. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw who it was. It was John. He stepped toward her, concern in his eyes. "Zira," he said softly. "What's going on? You look lost." Zira took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I am," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what to do anymore." John stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You don't have to make this decision alone, Zira. We can figure it out together. I told you before, I'm not going anywhere." Zira looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "It's not that simple, John. My father, my people, they want me to lead them, to crush the humans once and for all. I can't just walk away from everything I've been taught to believe." "I understand," John said quietly. "But you don't have to choose between them and me. You can choose yourself. You can choose your own path." Zira shook her head, the tears threatening to fall. "It's not that easy. If I choose you, if I choose love, I lose everything." My people will turn on me. My father will disown me. Everything I've ever known will be gone. I won't just be losing a war, I'll be losing myself. John took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. You won't lose yourself, Zira. You'll find out who you really are. You don't have to be trapped by your father's expectations. You don't have to follow the path he set for you. Zira's voice shook. I don't know how to live without those expectations. I've been told my entire life that my power is everything, that my strength is all I have. But now I'm afraid that if I let go, I'll fall apart. John took her hand in his, holding it tightly. You're not alone, Zira. I'm here. You don't have to let go of your power, but you don't have to let it control you. You can have both. You can be strong and still love. Zira looked down at their hands, her fingers trembling as she held his. The warmth of his touch was comforting, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, there was another way to live. She closed, her eyes taking a deep breath as she tried to gather her thoughts. The conflict inside her was intense. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that love could be her strength, not her weakness. But the pressure was too great. Her father would never accept it. The Empire would never accept it. She chose John. It would mean losing everything she had ever known. Could she really make that choice? I don't know if I can do this, John, Zira whispered, her voice full of fear. I don't know if I can give up my future, my family, for something I'm not even sure will work. John's heart ached for her. He knew what she was up against. But he also knew that she was stronger than she thought. You don't have to give up anything, he said firmly. You're choosing your own future, Zira. You're choosing yourself. And if you choose me, I'll be right by your side. We'll face it together. Zira looked up at him, searching his eyes for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was sincerity. He meant every word. I'm scared, John, Zira admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, John said softly. But you don't have to be afraid of what's to come. You're not alone. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotions. Zira could feel the weight of the decision she had to make. She had always been the one in control, the one with the power, the one who made the decisions. But now, for the first time, she felt as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a future she couldn't predict. And yet, for some reason, she didn't feel the terror she had expected. She felt hope. She took a deep breath, finally making a decision. I will choose love, John. I will choose you. John smiled, relief flooding through him. You won't regret it, Zira, I promise. Zira felt something shift within her, a weight she hadn't realized was there lifting off her shoulders. It wasn't the end of her journey. In fact, it felt like the beginning of something new, something she had never allowed herself to believe in before. For the first time in her life, Zira was choosing her own path. And it was the hardest thing she had ever done. But it was also the most freeing. The decision was made. Zira had chosen her path, and there was no turning back now. The weight of her choice settled heavily on her shoulders, but at the same time, there was a lightness in her chest, feeling she had never allowed herself to experience before. She had chosen love, and in doing so, she had freed herself from the chains that had bound her for so long. John stood by her side, as he had promised. His unwavering support gave her strength, but the fear was still there. Buried deep inside her, she was not naive. She knew what her choice meant. It meant breaking ties with her empire, with her family, and with everything she had been taught to believe. It meant risking everything for something she could not guarantee. The days that followed were filled with tension. Zira could feel the weight of the expectation from her people, from her father. She was their princess, their leader, and she had been raised to rule with an iron fist. Choosing John was not just a personal decision, it was a political one, for people found out there would be consequences. If her father found out, there would be no mercy. But despite the fear, there was a growing sense of clarity in Zira's mind. She knew she couldn't live her life in fear anymore. She couldn't keep pretending to be someone she wasn't. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that her people's expectations were just that, expectations. They didn't define her. She had the right to choose her own future, just as John had said. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of meetings, Zira found herself standing by the same window where it had all started. The stars outside were as beautiful and distant as ever. She stared at them, wondering if there was a place in the universe where she could finally find peace. A place where she could be herself without fear or guilt. John found her there, just like he had so many times before. But this time, he didn't approach her with questions. He didn't ask for anything. He simply stood beside her, his presence a quiet reassurance. "You've been quiet tonight," John said softly. "What's going on in your mind?" Zira took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving the stars. "I'm thinking about the future. My future. Our future." John nodded, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I know it's not easy, but you don't have to figure it out all at once." Zira finally turned to face him. Her eyes were serious, but there was a new calmness in her expression. "I've spent my whole life being what others wanted me to be," she said quietly. "I've lived for them, for their approval. But now, I want to live for myself. I want to live for you." John smiled at her, his heart swelling with pride. "You don't have to be perfect, Zira. You don't have to live up to anyone's expectations but your own." Zira's smile was small, but it was the first genuine smile she had given in a long time. It was a smile of relief, a smile of someone who had finally made peace with the choices they had made. "I'm afraid, John," she admitted, her voice soft. "I'm afraid of what will happen if I go against everything I've been taught. But more than that, I'm afraid of losing you." John's heart ached at her words. He reached out and took her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. "You won't lose me, Zira. No matter what happens, I'll be by your side." Zira looked down at their hands, the warmth of his touch bringing her a sense of peace. She hadn't known before. She had always believed that love was a weakness, that it would make her vulnerable. But now she understood that love was the strongest force she had ever known. It was the one thing that could truly set her free. "Thank you, John," Zira said, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for seeing me, for letting me be myself." John smiled softly. "I'm not doing anything special, Zira. I'm just giving you the freedom to be who you really are." Zira squeezed his hand, a surge of warmth flooding through her chest. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to face it with you." For a moment, they stood in silence, simply holding each other's gaze. It was a quiet moment, but it was filled with understanding. Zira had chosen to take the leap. She had chosen to trust in herself and in John, and for the first time, she felt like she was standing on solid ground. The next day, Zira knew it was time. She had to face her father, the king, and tell him the truth. She couldn't keep hiding from him, and she couldn't keep living in fear. It would be the hardest thing she had ever done. But she was ready when she entered her father's chambers. She found him sitting at his desk, looking over reports of the war. He didn't look up when she entered, but she knew he was aware of her presence. "You've been avoiding me, Zira," the king said, his voice stern. "What is it you're not telling me?" Zira stood tall, her back straight, her hands clenched at her sides. "Father, there's something I need to say, something I need to do." The king finally looked up, his eyes cold and calculating. "Out. Is it Zira?" Zira took a deep breath, her heart racing. "I'm not going to lead the way you want me to. I'm not going to continue this war. I've chosen a different path." The king's face hardened. "You speak nonsense, or am I?" "Heir Zira, you are the future of the Zirians. You cannot turn your back on everything I've taught you." Zira's gaze was unwavering. "I'm not turning my back on everything you've taught me. I'm choosing my own future. That future is with John. I'm choosing love over power, peace over war. I won't be the weapon you want me to be." The silence between them was thick with tension. The king's eyes narrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You choose a human over your people?" he asked, his voice low with anger. Zira stood her ground. "Yes, I choose love." The king rose from his chair, his presence imposing. "You will regret this, Zira. You are throwing away everything I built for you." Zira didn't flinch. "Not throwing anything away. I'm finally living for myself." Her father didn't say anything for a long time. But finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "Then you are no longer my heir," he said coldly, "and you are no longer welcome in this empire." Zira nodded, feeling both the pain of his words and the relief of her own choice. "I understand," she said quietly, "but I will not apologize for choosing my happiness." With that, Zero turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind a future she no longer wanted. She had chosen her path. It would be difficult, but for the first time it felt right.